Hey, how's it going, guys? Domino Paris 21 here, and finally back with another deck profile for you all. So, of course, as you see here, what I have to present to you guys is my finally updated Jewel Knight deck for post Fighters Collection Winter 2015. Now, I know I probably could be a little late on this, which I say, better late than never. I always say, but it took me a little while, a little longer than expected to finally get my playset of Evas. Which is why it kind of stalled me, which is why I stalled so long to finally posting this for you guys. But just overall in general, I'm just really excited to be able to play pure Jewel Knights again. And I think it's definitely appropriate to finally get this deck out to you guys, especially with the post-February restriction, especially with Sword Me being restricted to only essentially pure Jewel Knight decks, because all your grade 3s have to be Jewel Knights. So it definitely gave a huge rise to power with Jewel Knights, because not only did Eva itself brought a huge power boost to Jewel Knights to be almost comparable, if not better in some cases, than Sanctuary Guard Regali. It definitely brings Jewel Knights in favor of potentially being arguably the best build for Royal Paladins. Now, Sanctuary Guard, of course, is not dead by any means. And I actually been playtesting a lot with Sanctuary Guard with my buddy David from Vanguard as well, because he's playing playing around with Sanctuary Guard right now. Just being able to still play Sword Me in your deck and still having a power boost like Regali with Eva, and definitely having much better early game options, especially against the grade 2 game than Sanctuary Guard. There's definitely a lot of cases going for Jewel Knights right now, but I may reserve that for a future video in the comparison of the two, because there's definitely great arguments on both sides for it. But definitely both of them are very powerful decks. But Ashley Reverse, I'm just really excited to finally be able to play again, because Jewel Knights, surprisingly enough for some of you guys, is actually one of my favorite decks out there, and definitely one of my favorite archetypes. I fell in love with the deck post BT10 when they first came out, and the final build before I actually sold the deck was Ashley Reverse herself. So finally feel very glad that I'm able to get have her playset of her again and being able to effectively utilize her as I did before. Although her role has changed a little bit in the deck, and she actually gotten a little bit better, especially with a few cards that she can interact with as well, which should be a little obvious, but I'll get to as I get through the deck for you guys. But without further ado, let's actually get to the deck now, shall we? So first off, for the starters, you have your Jewel Knight Tiffany. So there's definitely a few choices that I had for starters. I actually was experimenting at first with, I can't remember the name, it was the dog starter, the new one that came out in Vanguard. The leader thing is Izumi or something. Gets like once per turn gets +3 to a superior called Jewel Knight. It sounded really good on paper for me, especially with interaction with Sword Me and Starlight Violinist, which I actually do still play in this deck. And when I was playing with it more, I kind of found it as a dead card a lot, and I found that, I wasn't always consistently hitting magic numbers anyway, especially when I was leading to the mid-late game. So I found Tiffany just very viable because two reasons. One, the double power boost she gives, obviously it's only for one turn, can definitely be essential in just fixing your columns to hit the next tier as far as your magic numbers are concerned. And also at the same time, she is a card that does go into soul, which I actually need every bit of my soul as possible to be able to effectively utilize a few key cards in my deck. So she's actually virtually the only starter that can actually go into soul that's a Jewel Knight, and I don't want to play Margles in my deck because I am still playing 12 crits in my deck. So yeah, I found Tiffany just to be really effective. And also at the same time, if you face any control decks that could potentially, blow her up early, you have the chance to just use her, maybe create a power column to force out some early damage against a control player, which can be very, very strong against control decks as well. With the exception of Link Joker, but that's another conversation. I hate dealing with them, but who doesn't if you're a Royal player, honestly? Now, for grade 3s, of course, you have the Yandere Crazy Bae herself, Ashley Reverse. So, Ashley Reverse, like I mentioned a little earlier, her role has definitely changed now as comparison to before when I was playing pure Jewel Knights. So, obviously, with Strides being a thing and Eva being a big power boost for their Jewel Knights in general, your win conditions has definitely changed, but what she does present to you is much stronger early game options, and really arguably some of the best early game options you can have in the game for its respective deck. Because a main key difference that you have now that you didn't have before is obviously Sword Me. As we should all know, it's a very, very strong card, and kind of in combination with Cymbeline, and obviously you do have your Limit Break Enabler as well. So being able to interact with all these cards from your deck with Ashy Reverse when you're presented early game options is very strong, and especially with Generation Break era, with the Grade 2 game being a default strategy for a lot of players on competitive tournaments, she could definitely be very punishing for those players, because obviously if someone chooses to not ride Grade 3, obviously they're taking a temporary -1 by doing that, and by passing it to you, you can freely ride your Grade 3 without having to grade lock yourself, especially if you have the plays available, and then you can just go Ashy Reverse with obviously Limit Break Enabler on the board by getting it with Sword Me from your hand. Then you can like go into Sword Me, into Cymbeline, and then that Cymbeline being able to give a +10 to your board, to one unit, could definitely fix a column to hit that next tier. And usually it's pretty easy if your opponent's on a 9K Grade 2, or even in some cases even a 10K Grade 2. So you could definitely create a nice momentum swing in your favor in the early game by turn 3 if your opponent, in a lot of cases, if your opponent chooses to play Grade 2 game with you, which through testing, that's pretty much what happened a lot of times. So I turned a lot of advantage in my favor by that first turn play when I ride Ashy Reverse, and I just kind of carried it on throughout the whole game. So yeah, Ashy Reverse, very, very powerful card now, especially in this format. The next up for my other Grade 3s, sorry guys, I actually dropped my cards here, so I'm trying to pick these up. There were some choices that I was kind of really discussing with some other players. So there's definitely opinions on what the secondary Grade 3s can be, but I chose to actually play the 4 Yvain. Yeah, that really bad Legion card for Jewel Knights. But, you know, Yvain actually found, he served a better role than I actually really thought. And, you know, as I discussed more with some other players of mine that actually favored this card, kind of made a little bit more sense just with how the rest of the deck is constructed. Now, I know Salome would have been the first option that a lot of players would go with, and I was kind of trying out the Salome, and I didn't like it too much. I mean, I understand that you could ride Salome, and obviously you could hit 19 crit 2 early with Limit Break Enablers against your opponent's Grade 2 9K, which is great, and obviously it makes a nice good turn, like turn 3. But after that, she doesn't really do much for you. And, I don't know, I just found Yvain to serve a really nice purpose because, as you're going to see with my Stride deck, spoiler alert, I actually don't play Saint Blow Dragon, which Saint Blow was definitely a nice good option for Royals to go into to get that extra crit for yourself. You know, to get a little bit of mid-game pressure on your opponent. But, you know, Yvain kind of fills in that role now because he's able to hit some pretty, like, a pretty nice number with, like, 34 crit 2 in the center. And in those options mid-game where you really don't want to maybe waste a Stride when it's not necessary. And the Legion is actually pretty nice to get, you know, triggers back in your deck, obviously. And I don't know, I just found Yvain to be really good for those mid-game options, especially with that extra crit. And while Salome essentially does the same thing, Yvain actually hits a stronger number anyway. But, you know, Salome is still an option to play in the deck. I'm not really saying that Salome is bad, but I just did not find it as ideal as I initially thought when I was playing with her, just for how I was playing with the deck. But definitely Ashy Reverse is definitely the #1 Grade 3 you should be playing in a Jewel Knights deck. Next up for Grade 2s. Man, I dropped my deck all over this floor. I'm clumsy today. So, of course, obviously you gotta have your 4 Sword Me's, right? There's not much more to say about that. I mean, you definitely got to have the 4 in the deck. And I'm kind of glad that he kind of went down in price too as well with the post restrictions. But hopefully it doesn't go back up for anyone who's trying to build the deck. But yeah, definitely got to run the 4 Sword Me. Not much more to say there. Then of course I am running the 4 Tracy. Obviously 12k attackers or 12k attackers. I am a little disappointed that, you know, we never got Fighters Collection in 2013 because I really wanted to hollow her out. But whatever, you know. First world Vanguard problems. And then my other Grade 2s, I am still playing the Starlight Violinist in the deck. Now, of course, I was playing Sanctuary. Now, before the February restrictions, I was playing Sanctuary Guard, and Violinist was definitely a very, very strong card for the deck. And almost a key card, I say, because by running Violinist, it essentially gives you 6 Sword Me's in the deck. So, you know, more chances to take advantage of the plus plays with Sword Me. Obviously, using her going to Sword Me and then using Sword Me skill gives you a +2 play, which can be almost unfair in some cases. but it also gives you those early game options because, especially in those cases where you're kind of forced to play the grade 2 game for a few turns against your opponent, Starlight Violinist was definitely a key card for that because, again, being able to run 6 Sword Maze is really strong, and Sword Maze is definitely how you address grade 2 game. Obviously, free 16k columns to still beat up your opponent regardless. Now, although like cards like Yvain does require a field of Jewel Knights to take advantage of his skill, I mean, some people would make that argument. I mean, honestly, it's not that big a deal. All I have to do is, like, take advantage of her skill, get the free advantage, and then just, you know, intercept with her and then use a skill. I mean, it's not... I hardly use Yvain's skill anyway, that much, so I didn't find that to be a big deal anyway, because I think her pros are way, way too good to not want to consider playing in your deck. And although, yeah, she can get pumped up by Eva, like I said, the early game options she gives you and the amount of advantage she can just give you early on it's just really too good not to consider playing in your deck. And then, as kind of like my one-of, I am playing this weird Jewel Knight card, Jewel Knight Kimbalis. I don't know, it was the start when Jewel Knight finally started getting guys and husbandos in their deck. But yeah, he's just a special intercept for Jewel Knight, so when you put him in when he intercepts into the Guardian Circle, you have 3 other Jewel Knight rear guards, he gets plus 10,000 shield, which is pretty good. So essentially he's a 15k shield for a cost of Soul Blast 1. So, you know, Starlight Violinist, Soul Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, I need 3 souls. So that's a reason why I play Tiffany in the deck. So, actually, you know, I found it to be better than I thought. I saw one of my buddies playing it, and it actually saved him in a lot of cases when we were playtesting, because that 15k shield could definitely make a big difference. Especially with how the meta is, either your opponent's decks are really going to hit you in the face really hard with big numbers, or they're just going to blow up your field. So I figured, you know, if my opponent's going to blow this up, I mean, he could be any other rear guard, it would be the same thing. But also at the same time, you know, if you are facing those matchups where, you know, it's aggro versus aggro, he could definitely help to give you the edge. Because, you know, it's nice that you can call him out with Starlight Violinist with a few plays that I do make, especially with Alt-Mile Stride. Which, you know, I'll go Alt-Mile Stride into Starlight Violinist. She'll gain +5, +3 for front row, so she'll still be a excuse me guys, a 16k by herself, and being able to go into here is actually pretty good. And then you can actually go into Tiffany to give like +3, or excuse me, +3 and then +3 to the booster, so you can still hit like 22 and 26, which is pretty strong. So not only you got a +1 from Violinist, you're able to, you know, fix your columns to hit those key numbers, and also at the same time you got a 15k shield for yourself. So that's definitely a lot of momentum you can swing in your favor with that one play with Alt-Mile Stride as well. So that I definitely love that. That's one of my favorite plays I actually go with, especially with Alt-Mile Stride. So that's it for grade 2s. Now, one thing you'll definitely want to address, of course, I don't play Twin Sword in the deck. One thing to keep in mind is Eva, when you use her, she's not like a continuous skill like how Regali is. So while you could still play Twin Sword in the deck, which was another option, you can cut out a few of your grade 2s to play the Twin Sword. I didn't find the need for it, you know, because you don't really have a way to effectively tutor the Twin Sword, since I'm not running the GB1 starter. And, you know, you pretty much have to kind of like dead draw him, and there are cases where he may not be as effective until like later in the game. So I didn't find him as consistent, so I chose not to play him. But Twin Sword can definitely be another viable option depending, but he just didn't work out for me in testing. And for grade 1s, it's like spilled all over here. Of course, we're still going to be running, obviously, 4 Perfect Guards. I'm still sticking with I'm actually sticking with Jewel Knight Perfect Guards this time, just because, obviously, make Sword Me as consistent as possible. And there's going to be those weird cases where you're kind of forced to Superior Call call one of these. I actually did it situationally to make sure my Yvain hits that crit too. But yeah, and plus Metalborgs is actually pretty big in my locals, and I need a way to deal with Laurel. So, and Metalborgs is actually still lurking around there because obviously Laurel never got hit. So that's another reason to still play these, but I mainly want them because they're Jewel Knights. So not much more to it than that. Of course, you're going to run like your 4 Stride Enablers, which I feel so grateful that I have 4 signed ones. Definitely shout outs to some of my local guys who helped me get these a long while back before these like went up in price. So really happy I got these. Then definitely like easily one of my favorite cards in the deck, 4 Cymbeline. As you guys should know, when he's placed on Rearguard Circle, you have 3 other Jewel Knights, rest him, and you give a Jewel Knight unit +10. Note that I say unit because you could pump up your Vanguard as well. Because there's some cases where you lock your Vanguard booster, and maybe you may actually want to pump up the Ashley Reverse so it's not hitting for like a a measly 11k. So he actually hits for a nice 21. But yeah, I love the Force Cymbeline. Just always having that, it virtually gives me an option in multiple stages of the game where the plus 10 can be beneficial. Although kind of much later in the game, Eva, you may not need to because Eva's already hitting, it's already far exceeding what he can power up your rear guards for. But early mid-game, definitely very strong. And there are even cases where, I got him off like 2 or even 3 times mid-game, which again, swung a lot of momentum in my favor. And then I am playing, of course, 2 Stride Enablers. A Stride Enabler, excuse me. Limit Break Enablers for obvious reasons for Ashley Reverse. But I think 2 is all you need because you have Sword Me that can get into it and Starlight Violinist that can get into Sword Me, which can get into this. So 2 is fine. I am actually not playing the new Double R for Fighters Collection. I can't remember her name, but it's the one that when you on play, Counterblast 1, reveal a grade 3, Superior Call, another grade 3 from your deck, and then add it to your hand, discard 1 if you have 3 other Jewel Knights. I chose not to play her because I was experimenting with her, but it did kind of force me to cut a few cards from my grade 1s, and I really want to leave Cymbeline at 4 for the reasons I mentioned. I don't want to cut a Stride Enabler because striding is so big for this deck, and I really don't like running less than 4 Stride Enablers with the exception of few select decks. But that could definitely be an option. I mean, it's not bad. I just never found the need for it. I literally used it one time just because so I can use it mid-game with Yvain. That was the one time, but I didn't really have to do that. But, there's definitely a lot of uses you can use for it because I know one of my buddies, he's actually using that because he actually techs in 1 or 2 Salome in his deck, so it gives him that ability to search out for that Salome. In those cases, maybe he actually wants to go into Salome early game if it's viable. So it's definitely not a bad card to play, and it may actually end up coming back into the deck, but for now, I never found a use for it at all. So, I just wanted to keep... So I just found it to be just fine to keep these grade 1s itself at these ratios. So, but yep, that's my grade 1s. And then triggers, obviously, like I just said earlier, 12 crits for heal. As really how the generation break is as far as your deck building is concerned. If your deck can build some kind of attrition for yourself, or even have ways for you to conserve resources, hence Link Joker, there's really no reason not to run 12 crits. There's almost virtually no other deck I play that actually runs draw triggers with the exception Brawlers, Kagurail, because they don't build attrition for itself and it needs the ability to draw into options. But, like I said, if your deck builds so much attrition for itself, an advantage for itself, there's really not much reason to not run 12 crits. Especially with strides giving you triple drive. It's just really, really good. It's too good almost. But that's, again, up for another discussion in the near future. Alright, and last but not least, going over the strides. There's definitely a few options I was kind of going with, but as I discussed with another one of my fellow players, I felt like this kind of made the most sense for me, although, there's definitely a few other options I'm considering going for, but just kind of get her out of the way. You have your 4 Evas, of course. Now, Eva, of course, you guys don't know, excuse me, once per turn, you can choose a face down stride unit from your G zone and turn it face up. Keep in mind it's not a persona flip, so you can flip anything else if you want for her, and then until the end of turn, all your Jewel Knight units gain +3 for every face up copy of her in the G zone. So by running 4, since it's not restricted to persona flip, you can, first stride you go into Eva, flip herself, get +3 to everything. Then second stride, you're going to have 2 face up already, so you actually have the ability to flip maybe a dead stride that you're not using, that's not Eva, to save her, so you can use it a 3rd time, so then you will have +6 to everything, so it's +12 to your columns, which is nice. And then the final time, obviously it's going to be +18 to your columns because it's +9 to everything, so that's usually by then my opponent's going to be... I usually end up closing out the game by then. Or, you can even do it twice depending on how the game goes for you, but... yeah, very extremely powerful card for Jewel Knights for that reason I just mentioned. Some people even ask me, should you only play 3? But I say no, it's kind of stupid not to play less than 4 or to play Lesson 4 just because of the reasons I just explained. Being able to have the option to effectively use her 3 times, or even to just use her twice for just 2 big swings, it's really good. And there are times I even was able to get my opponent to like 5 pretty quickly, and I just, you know, did it, and by the time I did her the second time, I just did full power, you know, plus 18 in my columns, and, you know, it's really tough for your opponent to handle it at that point. So yeah, you can definitely achieve much bigger numbers than where Regali could. Obviously, with the lack of Twin Sword, you know, Twin Sword is definitely very powerful. It's what keeping Sanctuary Guard extremely viable, but yeah, the numbers that you hit with Eva's late game is so devastating for your opponent. Then, of course, I saw I am still running the 2 Alt Mile Stride. So there was definitely a argument between running Alt Mile, and there's also Saint Blow, which again I don't play Saint Blow, which I'll explain in a little bit. But love the Alt Mile Stride because it does give you that option against control decks that retire your field. So being able to go into a Sword Me is really powerful, or like I showed you earlier with Starlight Violinist, you can go Violinist into Sword Me, or you can even go Violinist into your 15k Interceptor depending on the matchup, like if it's aggro. So it definitely presents more options for you, and definitely, you know, depending how you set up your board already, it allows you kind of conserve your Eva a little bit if you want to save it, especially if you're maybe in a back and forth game, maybe your opponent's healing too much, or they're just, you know, sacking the hell out of you. But yeah, Alt Mile just presents more options for you without actually, you know, mitigating with your deck's about, because, you know, you can still hit some pretty powerful numbers as well. So love the Alt Mile card. He's definitely the superior card to Saint Blow Dragon. Then my other 2 options, since I'm not playing Saint Blow, I'm actually just running as one Gablade and 1 Samuel. So the Gablade, of course, is like that early game option for you to add some pressure to your opponent, to really force out like a PG, and obviously because if your opponent lets this hit, you get a free Sword Me column essentially. That's usually the target you go for. Also, on the same note, you know, if you open really bad, which rarely happens, but it can, it's that option as well to get a field. But also, it's another play against control decks. Not Link Joker, that's a different story, but like more retiring decks, because a lot of times control players will play the chicken fight with you. Like, they won't commit too much necessarily unless they just have the God Hand. And they usually like to wait until you start calling units from your hand. But, you know, if I only maybe have like 1 Sword Me in my hand, I don't have any other follow-up options, I'll just won't call a field. If they give me first stride, I just won't call a field and just call Gablade by itself and then just swing at them and just challenge them to have the perfect guard or let me get a free card. Because what happens is, you know, if it hits, you get a free Sword Me column essentially, and while instinctively then they'll start going into their plays to blow up your field, you know, you kind of force them to use up a resource point or one of their options to blow up your field, and they, you know, obviously they feels like they're making a good play by doing that, but, you know, you kind of just, you know, you got that whole column for free anyway, and it gives you another turn to draw into more options to kind of get another follow-up to them, and at that point you're actually committing cards from your hand. So that's a few reasons to play Gablade. So it's actually a little bit more in-depth than you may have thought, but that's why I like the Gablade in the deck. And I am playing the 1 Samuel. There's those situations where maybe your first stride Samuel is actually pretty good. Maybe you have a trash hand that, you know, maybe Eva won't work because maybe you're forced to call non-Jewel Knight units. And that 1 damage, you know, can maybe set yourself up for Eva plays. But I honestly never used the Samuel. There are situations where I could have, but I just found Eva to be better. But there could be some situation that can present itself for that reason. Plus, at the same time, as far as like World Strides, there's really nothing else good. I mean, you could play that 1 promo that gives like +5, but I don't know. I'm still keeping Samuel in the deck for the reasons I explained. Plus, like I said, what's great with Eva, usually Samuel is the unit I throw away when I'm on 2nd Eva and I just throw away a Stride to conserve Evas. I usually just throw away the Samuel because at that point you don't really need him. But he does give you that first stride option as well. So, yep, that is the strides itself. I don't like Saint Blow, although Saint Blow can help, I guess, in situations. Again, Link Joker when you don't have a board. But honestly, it's only that you only get that 1 turn to try and take the game away from your opponent if you're facing that matchup. And, you know, I don't know, like, you only have one shot, and most likely they'll have a perfect guard, or they can just easily, you know, dump their hand and be okay, because they only still have to deal with only one attack, and they're going to keep locking your field down. So, St. Blow, although it did win me one game in that situation, it's super situational, and it just takes up too many options for your strides, you know, and I really like all my stride options right now for the reasons that I explained in depth to you guys. So yeah, we're right now at 25 minutes. I know it's a really long deck profile, but ever since Stride Era, you know, I have even more depth to talk about for you guys. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this deck profile. I'm definitely going to try and get some matches out for you guys. I know I'm really thin in matches, but I'm definitely going to try and showcase this deck to you guys. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give a thumbs up to this video. That's always appreciated. Leave a comment down below, any questions or anything. And as always, thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.